Okay, before getting started, I want to make it clear what my bias is. Specifically, I am pro-America. And if you've been listening to these videos for a long time, you might be scratching your head right now, initially, when you hear that, thinking, wait, hold on a second. Based on everything else that you've said, how could you actually support not just America, but the concept of a country in and of itself? I've heard you say, well, it's just imaginary lines slapped on a map, a fictitious entity, a corporation that exists only on paper. And of course, all of that is true. However, if you are viewing it like you might view a chess game, well, you know at this stage in the script, the design is for America to be destroyed. This has been going on for decades. Slowly over time, it's been gutted of its economic might, and that's been spread around the world to help create a worldwide system of governance that will eventually exist if these intelligences pulling the strings behind the scenes get their way. As a result, it's pretty simple to look at that situation and say, okay, well, if the plan is saying that America must be destroyed, then my default setting is that I am pro-America and I support its existence, in spite of everything that has been attributed to America that is some pretty evil stuff, if you are viewing it from the perspective of someone that does not live here and is viewing the actions from abroad. And rightly so. There's no way you can argue that a lot of the things attributed to the American government are not pure evil. But this is all a part of the game called countries, where the actions of a government that doesn't represent the people who live there in any way, shape, or form, and indeed, almost all of these governments are staffed by entities that have no relationship to the people of the country over which they preside. However, in this game played in the media, where we are always looking for someone to blame for our problems, the government of a country does something and we say, oh, it's the people there. We use the term Americans are this, or Russians are this, based on the actions of a government that has shown over many decades and centuries that it has no loyalty to its citizens. Also, I am pro-America because the Bill of Rights is the single most important document that has ever been written in the history of this planet. I mean, at least as far as the history that we are aware of, those of us with amnesia about the past. And it's pretty simple to see why that's the case. Yes, of course, there were agents of the British Crown within the revolutionary elements, and you can look at the Treaty of Paris and other documents that make it clear that we never won that war. It was surrendered in a sense, and we were given the illusion of a victory so that we would continue to serve the interests of the British Empire in the way that it deemed correct and necessary. But there were also true elements of revolutionary figures who could see the bigger picture and were actively using the opportunity to try and convince everyone that the original Constitution as proposed didn't do enough to protect from tyrannical overreach by, at the time it was kings, against their subjects. This was an opportunity to actually do something to combat that. And of course, a part of allowing this to happen eventually, they had to allow the Bill of Rights because a bunch of the colonies said, look, we're not going to ratify the Constitution if you don't agree to do this also. So they kind of begrudgingly agreed to it, but also knowing the purpose of America as the new Atlantis to grow into the empire that it became, to spread the one world system around the globe. I mean, that was its ultimate purpose. And now that it has served that purpose, it is being dismantled, as I said. So part of that, they had to allow a middle class to grow in America, to allow it to become the economic power that it later became. And the Bill of Rights was a part of that. You just look at the amendments and it makes perfect logical sense what it was protecting against. You have an amendment that says, hey, we should have free speech and we should have the freedom to practice whatever religious belief that we align with. And the government, which should be a limited government if it exists at all on a federal level, on a level beyond the individual states, that government should have no ability to infringe on my ability to speak my mind and also practice whatever religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs that I adhere to. And then you can see how all of the amendments from there are designed to both protect those first two and also strengthen the resistance to tyrannical overreach from a federal government. Second Amendment says, hey, we have the right to bear arms. You cannot infringe upon my right to protect myself from you. I mean, people have lost that connection to what it was originally about. It was originally, hey, we have all this experience of these governments and these kings doing unspeakable things to us and us having no recourse against that. And this is our way of saying, no, we're going to be able to protect ourselves in this country if it's going to be created in this way. And then you have a couple due process amendments that are focused on the legal system. You are entitled to due process procedurally in court. And this is to protect you from some kind of kangaroo court situation where they can just say whatever they want to say and throw you in jail. And then the Fourth Amendment kind of plays into that as well, where it says, hey, also, no unreasonable searches and seizures. You can't come into my home or my car without a search warrant. And they've legislated all kinds of exceptions into that now, but that was the original intention. Hey, I've watched the king just send its minions into people's homes and do whatever they want to them. Well, we're going to stop that as well. And then also, as a part of that, we're going to have the right to not incriminate yourself if you are arrested by authority. We're going to say, hey, no, actually, I don't have to say anything, and you can't force me to say anything, because, of course, you can imagine a scenario where the king or whoever the authority figure was in a particular country would bring somebody in and just force them to confess to something or else, right? And that was a way to say, no, you don't have to say anything. So you can see how important the Bill of Rights is, and you can see why so much of the modern propaganda is designed to chip away at those rights that are inherent to everyone who is an American. So that is why I'm ultimately pro-America, just because that document exists here, and of course I live here, and it's kind of the last stand against what is being planned all around us. And I especially want to make that clear for those who might be still leaning in directions that aren't in alignment with protecting that document, because they look at the media's portrayal of those who claim to be for America and they can see how ridiculous they are. And that's what all of those fake conspiracies are designed to convey, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that here. it's to put that image in your mind of the people who allegedly support these things. I mean, they do the same thing with the idea of God. They make that concept seem absurd. Look at the people who claim to be about God. They do this with shows like The Righteous Gemstones on HBO. That is quote unquote funny and has all these quote unquote stars who are comedians in it, and everyone watches it and they subconsciously and both overtly promote the idea of how ridiculous these evangelical preachers and their view of religion is. And that is objectively true, but that's not what God is. That's not what true religion is. So anyway, I want to get into a little bit of what I have on the screen here, which gets into the idea of the heel in professional wrestling. I mean, every child should be required to view at least one season of WWF. I mean, it'll always be WWF to me because that's what it was when I grew up. It's WWE now. And that might be a more accurate representation, World Wrestling Entertainment, in the sense that they're not even pretending to not be scripted in advance at this point. But by watching that, you really begin to understand how the scripting of a narrative works. And when you apply what you learn there to what you see going on in the world, it fits perfectly. It is amazing how it works like that. And in this particular scenario, we have Putin playing the role of the heel. Because as you can see from news articles like this one is from 2012, Putin welcomes Kissinger, old friends to talk shop. Mr. Peskov and Mr. Kissinger requested the meeting in late November or early December. The two men are old friends, quote unquote, who have met 8 or 10 times over the years, once dining at Mr. Kissinger's house in New York. So this is a familiar scene. There's a picture of Alexander Dugin and Zbigniew Brzezinski that is kind of similar along these lines. You have these geopolitical figures all interacting with the same people in different countries. State leaders, presidents, prime ministers. In other words, if you know the history of Henry Kissinger, you can see from stories like this that the perceived evil bad guys are no different than the perceived great good guys as they are portrayed by the media in terms of who they interact with and in terms of what agendas they are following. I mean, this is so simple, right? If Putin was against the quote-unquote New World Order as it is sold to you by all these disinformation artists on the internet, if that was true, would Russia have followed the virus guidelines for the past 2 years, knowing what that agenda was all about? I mean, there you go. There's your answer. No, if he was actually against it, Russia would not have followed any of that. But of course, they did, like everyone else. And that's about as deep as I want to get into all of that right now. I want to focus more directly on propaganda. Because this is from Reddit. What's the deal with our conspiracy sympathizing with or supporting Russia? Well, this is pretty simple. It gets into everything that I've been discussing to this point. When you become aware of conspiracy theories or you start to become aware of the truth and then you are led into the realm of conspiracy theories because there is a lot of truth there when you become aware, forgetting about all of the characters that are put there in advance to catch you in their webs and prevent you from actually seeing what's really going on, forgetting about those gatekeepers, when you become aware, you start to see how the media is lying. And because of the agenda, because America is being used to spread what they refer to as democracy across the world, the American media has lied about a lot of stuff. And as you start to dig into the truth of what's really going on, you just start to become anti-American by default, because you're learning so much about what they have done through the American government. And this is even while you're learning about Project Paperclip and how the American government funneled a lot of the Third Reich into America, and they took on great positions of power in all kinds of different disciplines. Even as you're learning that, you become anti-American, even knowing that it's not really people that you grew up with down the street from you who are in these positions of power. You get that natural slant to the way that you're perceiving everything. That's your natural lens. And so when something in the script comes out like what's going on now, it does seem like a lot of conspiracy is supporting Russia, but that's only because so much of that is focused on seeing the lies that are coming from the media that you are by default in a position that is against America when it has turned its eye of Sauron to a particular entity or nation. You will just by default be seen as supporting that nation because you're saying, no, I have all this evidence of the propaganda machine that supports this nation lying. And so by default, I'm thinking they're lying now. And then by default, you're supporting the thing that they are opposed to. And then as a corollary to this, because this is a trend that has been going on for a long time now. I mean, since the era of McCarthy and the start of the John Birch Society. You can trace so many of the figures in the alternative media and the conspiracy media back to those roots. But you go to the idea, since when did being a conspiracy theorist become associated with being a Republican? And I've gone into this in great detail in many videos. But I'll go over it real quick here from a Reddit comment. So what they did was actually pretty smart. You're going to reveal corruption anyway, as a part of your long-term goal for world government. So they created a plan where the conspiracy media would slowly reveal that corruption and then eventually merge with the right-wing political media. What started as the 9/11 Truth Movement eventually became the Ron Paul Tea Party Glenn Beck movement, political, which then became the Donald Trump movement, political, which then became the QAnon movement, again, political. Before you knew it, people like Rush Limbaugh were openly talking about things that were only mentioned on forums like this one. Tucker Carlson is doing the same thing as we speak. And this, I'll get into a little bit further, but specifically this comment was written 7 months ago. And it's only now that you're really seeing his role in all of this come to fruition, but we'll get into that. In other words, the controlled conspiracy media was always leading people in this direction, and Donald Trump solidified it by representing all of this stuff with a big R for Republican next to his name. So now you have this fake, sensationalized version of quote-unquote truth being promoted that fits neatly into the old RVD paradigm. And that's kind of what I want to get into further here. They've been priming people for this since Donald Trump came into office. And I just want to go over a bunch of headlines here to explain this. The perfect target: Russia cultivated Trump as asset for 40 years, ex-KGB spy, from January of 2021. Will Trump be meeting with his counterpart or his handler? And you have Trump and they've Prump and Tootin. That's actually kind of ridiculously funny. Anyway, Trump went from useful idiot onto an unwitting asset of Russia, former U.S. intelligence officer claims. This is from 2019. Trump sides with Russia against FBI at Helsinki summit. This is from 2018. Trump, I believe Putin on election meddling. Intel leaders, you're getting played. This is from 2017. 37 times Trump was soft on Russia. This is from 2020. Trump and Putin, a love story from 2016. All of Trump's Russia ties in 7 charts from 2017. The hidden history of Trump's first trip to Moscow from 2017. Russia, Trump, and the 2016 U.S. election from 2018. And of course, this is a part of the larger narrative that was promoted out there that there was Russian interference in the election. This was what was promoted to the D side for years, for 4 years, ever since he was elected. This has been programmed into their minds to the people who aren't aware of any of this yet. From Time Magazine, the history that links Trump and Putin. This is from 2015. Interesting, right? Before he was even... Well, I guess this would have been after he was elected. This was after the election in November. So look at that. Within a month, well, I guess a little over a month, almost 2 months after the election of Donald Trump, you have this article from Time Magazine, the history that links Trump and Putin, because they were priming everyone from that early date to accept the propaganda that's going on now to serve the larger agenda. And what is that agenda? Honestly, I don't really know. I mean, it's rare that I'm kind of in this position that I can't see exactly what it is designed to achieve within the larger context of what they are trying to achieve. This one's a little hazy as far as what the Russia-Ukrainian conflict is designed to achieve. Now, you could get into ideas about maybe the micro and the macro as far as cancel culture goes, and you could maybe see how they're attempting to shift cancel culture from just a domestic political tactic into an international political tactic. Meaning, look at what they've done to Russia as far as sanctions go. And I mean, to the extreme of, canceling Russian cats from some program I read or something insane like that. You know, they've taken it to the extreme of canceling everything that's surrounding the country of Russia, anything that's associated with it. And that's very similar to what they did, in the Me Too movement, or what they did as it related to the virus. If you did not do certain things that were the official sanctioned things that you needed to do, you were treated in a very similar way, and that was domestically. And so I wonder if maybe a part of it will be to kind of normalize the idea of this sort of thing being a tactic that's acceptable on the international level, to the point where you can see how it would be the as above, so below thing going on, where both individual citizens will have this social credit associated with them, as well as the countries themselves. And if you go against the system, well, here's what happens to you. And just on that note, this is from the World Health Organization in March of 2021. Global leaders unite in urgent call for international pandemic treaty. So you can see how all of these international agreements in their final form, if achieved, would sort of play that role, to where if you went against what the consensus was in the treaties as a country, well, now you're canceled at that point. It's over for you. And that would quickly get countries that drag their feet along these lines to submit and comply, in the same way that it's designed to do it to an individual citizen who doesn't go along with the agenda. Right? How many people lost their jobs because of these policies in the initial stages of the last 2 years? And this even goes to the extent of priming people for the future with Hillary Clinton suggesting Russians are grooming Tulsi Gabbard for third-party run. And this is where the fake conspiracy stuff is tied into the narrative now. I mean, as I went over 2 years ago, every psychological operation has the sanctioned conspiracy theories that are released as a part of the operation. And you can see these spread like wildfire in real time. We'll get to Tulsi Gabbard, but the best example of this was right as the whole thing started, there was this story that came out that implied, just based on images, that all of the strikes that the Russian government was making was actually striking U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. And this was instantly debunked. And now there's permutations to that where they say, oh, well, yes, there are labs there, but they're not biolabs. And this is designed to just get people arguing with each other into eternity without ever resolving anything. But you can see how this was a direct story designed to appeal to those who were into the Q type information, because they've been told for years and years and years, and that is a part of what I went over here, that Trump was fighting against that media that I was discussing earlier. He was fighting against that quote-unquote deep state. And by them associating Trump and Putin, now they put that story out there about the striking of biolabs, because then it seems to that mindset like, oh, I see, Putin's carrying on what Trump was carrying on. He's actually against the evil New World Order. He's destroying these biolabs. He's on our side, right? And they were priming everyone for this by linking Trump and Putin together for 4 years. And linking Trump and Russia together in the collective mind for 4 years. And then that is where the stories like Tulsi Gabbard come into play, who, of course, is a World Economic Forum young leader. She's intimately tied in with the CFR as well. And you can see the strategy of the WWF at work here in this photo. The hero and the villain, or the villain and the hero, depending on which side you're on, depending on which one you like better. Because as it is in wrestling, some people like the villains. They just like what their storyline is. They like the way they carry themselves, and that's why they like them, even though they're set up in the script as the bad guy, quote unquote. Right, and then here is a hashtag that was trending on Twitter a few days ago. Hashtag Tucker Carlson Russian asset. They're playing the same game that they are with Tulsi Gabbard with Tucker Carlson, who, by the way, has the most watched show on cable news, which kind of shows you the state of all of this in America and how effective the propaganda has been on both sides. The Kremlin must be paying Tucker Carlson a lot of money so he can repeat their talking points. So let's everybody just block him tonight. Thank you. And there's that cancel culture, right? And I hope you see how that ties right back in to what I was discussing in the beginning about the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment here. Well, we're supposed to be able to speak our minds in this country. And that's what cancel culture is all about, is blocking that ability. The entire Republican Party is the party of Putin, bent, corrupt, and complete traitors. And that's part of why some of this is hazy for me, is just the natural cognitive dissonance of them completely flipping the script on everyone, where now you are patriotic and for America if you support Ukraine, and you are anti-American if you are in any way pointing out how the media is not being completely transparent and honest in their handling of this. and they're trying to cancel you for saying that, right? I mean, it's kind of wild. But I guess I kind of answered my own haziness by talking it out in real time. It makes a little more sense now. Let's get into a few more of these. What is sort of inexplicable here is that what is being said by Tucker Carlson is almost a plagiarism of Vladimir Putin. It's almost word for word what Putin has said in making the argument to justify what's happening in Ukraine. And I should say, I underestimated just how evil the people orchestrating all of this are. I mean, because we have to keep in mind, when you say the word script and you refer to it as theater WWF style productions, you kind of lose sight of the fact that real people are being murdered as a part of all of these psychological operations. It's inexcusable. It's unbelievable how evil that is to be murdering people in this way. But I mean, that's just the nature of this world currently, unfortunately. But yeah, I want to make sure we're keeping that in mind as we read all of this. Because I don't want to play into disinformation in that way. ABC News, Russia's baseless claims about secret American biological warfare labs in Ukraine are taking root in the U.S. too, uniting COVID-19 conspiracy theorists, QAnon adherents, and some supporters of ex-President Donald Trump. And as I've said in so many videos over the years, it's all designed to lump these fake conspiracy theories together to create the idea of the domestic terrorist. Because that's another angle to this too, where if you are against the official narrative coming out of America, well, as it's been primed in the mind, you are pro-Russian. And now you are quite literally a domestic terrorist. It's more so than just being promoting wrongthink. Now you're actually supporting a foreign country that is waging war on an alleged ally of America. You are literally engaging in domestic terrorism, promoting that narrative as it's relayed by them. I mean, that's how they spin that, right? So that's another angle to all this going on too, which is just wild stuff. The fact that Tucker Carlson has most watched show in cable news in America is terrifying. And of course, you can find tweets, which are most likely bots, let's be real. Not to say that they all are, but most of them are, that are saying the exact opposite thing. Oh, the fact that all these people have blue and yellow up here in their profile is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, or something along those lines, right? That's the point. It's just R versus D on a different level, in a different plane of existence, as it were, a different scale. Oh, this is Ahmadinejad, who of course used to be the leader of Iran. And he's even increasing that idea that I was just getting into about domestic terrorism, where he's repeating the narrative that you will find on a lot of these alternative quote-unquote conspiracy websites and YouTube channels, or wherever they are now. Telegram again, created by somebody with ties to the World Economic Forum. I mean, wake up, guys. What does he say? Following the Russia invasion of Ukraine, the United States has offered a safe transfer of Zelensky and his family abroad, to which he has responded negatively so far. Doesn't this indicate coordination between U.S. and Russia in implementing a pre-planned scenario? So he's even getting to the points that I'm getting to, right? And they're trying to label that as domestic terrorism, given how they portray Iran in the worldwide media. Offering Ukraine a membership in NATO was only to pave the way for the implementation of the tripartite agreement between the United States, Russia, and China. They are redistributing the world among them. They never grant Ukraine any membership in NATO. Very interesting that Ahmadinejad is saying this on Twitter. Not a day without Tucker Carlson on Russia's state TV. Here's another clip being used by the Russians to promote their disinformation about Ukraine, allegedly creating bioweapons in its lab. Tuckyo Rose delivers again. And it's so interesting, right, how this whole bioweapon angle in Ukraine is going to kind of bump another lab that was in the news a couple of years ago, or for the past 2 years, and questions surrounding that lab. Very interesting. Search feed's going to be clogged with a lot of different lab stories now. Oh, this is the only people in America who look... Oh, sorry. The only people in America who like you are all funny-looking, uneducated, degenerate, trailer trash white people who look like they literally effed every last chromosome out of their Hitler-humping hillbilly gene pool. And of course, this is the image that is intentionally portrayed as it relates to the conspiracy theorists. That's ultimately this person or bot or shill, whoever it was, whatever the case may be, along with these hashtags, is really trying to cement that idea in your mind in less propagandic terms. They're just coming outright and saying it, what they want everyone to think. Tucker Carlson is a traitor, as is Fox News, for spreading Russian propaganda and lies at every turn. They should be removed from every cable package and streaming service. There you go again, right? Here's this cancel culture being pushed even further into the mainstream narrative. And then this is getting back to Tulsi Gabbard, which Clinton promoted way back in 2019, getting people familiar with that idea. Since her first days in office, Tulsi Gabbard has been a parrot for Putin. She pushed to keep Ukraine out of NATO. She blamed the US and NATO for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. She constantly defended Putin's actions. Is Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset? Russia's state TV showcases clips of Tucker Carlson and Tulsi Gabbard helping to perpetuate the myth of dangerous bioweapons in Ukraine. This conspiracy theory is being spread by Russia's state TV with special zeal. The View hosts discuss investigating, arresting Tucker Carlson and Tulsi Gabbard. Now, this is definitely WWF theater. But you see the idea they're trying to get in people's minds here with this propaganda. This is Trump and Putin, and I just wanted to highlight their handshake here. Those of you who are familiar with Masonic handshakes, I'll leave it to you to just go confirm this for yourself. But this says everything that you need to know, okay? Remember just charged Elena Branson. According to FEC records, in her decade allegedly working as a Russian agent, she gave money to just one federal candidate, Tulsi Gabbard. Of course, this breaks at exactly the same time that all this is going on. Going back to the Ahmadinejad tweet, Iranian hackers behind Proud Boys' ruse pose wider threat, FBI says. Hackers who sent phony election emails targeting global firms. We could be maybe seeing the priming for what is to come in the future. Of course, everybody knows about cyber Polygon. Maybe a part of this narrative that's being built here will be the cyber attack that is blamed on Russia. And then now you see, from ABC News, bracing for potential cyber attacks, a high-level look at Russia's hacking capabilities. And there was just in the news that Israel suffered a cyber attack that hasn't really filtered out yet. So maybe we're seeing the priming for that. I could see that being where this is all leading, in the sense of, okay, we've had this propaganda for 4 years, well, 6 years now, linking Trump to Russia, linking conspiracy theorists to Russia for all the reasons that I went into already. And then as a result of all these sanctions against Russia, the cancel culture being applied to the country itself, putting them into a corner, maybe then they orchestrate a cyber attack, who knows where and for how long or what it would actually do as far as damage goes. But then they trace it back to Russia, and then everything is canceled if you were associated with that in any way, because that's legit terrorism, right? And it'll have legit consequences. And that'll be all a part of how everything is being reset right now in terms of what the response would be. Well, if that happens, we really need to have sort of a driver's license for the internet. No more anonymous speech on the internet. So I could see maybe how it's leading towards that outcome, but I'm not predicting that. I honestly don't know where this is headed, and I don't pretend to know. So keep that in mind with everything that I've gone into here. But one last one was Meta. This is from CBS. Meta says Russians targeting Ukrainians with misinformation and hacking attempts on Facebook. The same Meta Facebook that said they were temporarily going to allow death threats in certain places because, well, we say so. That's okay. Your death threats are okay, but not your speech that we deem as canceled on the internet. You can't say that, but you can threaten death given the circumstances if you live in this place. But again, this is going back to the potential priming that's being done here for a cyber attack, which surely would have multifaceted aims and goals that it would wish to achieve, as all of these things do. But like I said, part of it would be getting rid of anonymity on the internet, and that would tie into all of the digital ID infrastructure that they also are trying to bring in right now. So that's enough. Later.